to What's New in Electronics 2019. I'm joined by Stuart Saunders from the MTC and Joe Booth from Altus.
Thanks for having us.
And today, the round table we've got today is Robotics. Let me just get the full title because it's quite serious, sadly, actually. Industrial Robotics, Trends, Challenges and the Future. So that basically takes in everything. Where do you think we're at the moment? Now, actually, you've kind of worked together, actually, both of you, haven't you? With you're putting a line in at the MTC, aren't you?
That's right. So, yeah, Altus are a really good Tier 3 member at the MTC, and some of our equipment is Altus provided. The robotics side for the MTC, there's a huge intelligent automation theme. And we've even got, I think, we have a Frantic robot, which is the world's largest robot. It's the size of a small lorry, but we have many robots in different applications. And then the theme that would take care of that is intelligent automation. So yeah, I'm representing the electronics theme, and of course robotics is everywhere. But I would encourage people to get in touch if for specific robot stuff. Thank you, Ian. And your question was, where are we with it? I think when you look at the automotive industry, I mean,
that's what everyone thinks about, really, don't they?
And it's been there, and for a little while. So I was GEC, which was English Electric, and they made robotic controllers. I think were they called GEM maybe, and they were in the rover plants. They had robots going, so it's not so new, and we've grown up with them. And what I am conscious of is where we are with it. People are probably wary of them taking people's places, but really, does anybody want to be doing repetitive, mundane work? And I think Michael at the CFX presentation first thing this morning, the keynote speaker, Michael Ford, he mentioned that human beings are the most flexible resource we have in a factory, and that flexible resource should be pointed to variation, but if there is repetition, then that's where the robots come in. And I think the biggest question on everybody's mind, I think it's one of the round tables later, is how have the British workforce, how do we have to evolve into a world where there is a large amount of robotics happening? So yeah, probably it's evolution of the humans to work alongside the robots is the biggest challenge right now.
And everybody thinks of robotics as being the cliche arm putting pieces together on a car production line or an aircraft production line, whatever. But that isn't always the case, is it? I mean, robotics can come in at quite small levels where, like you say, it's actually putting components together that then human beings can put together assemble into something more.
Yeah, and I mean, from Altus' perspective, because we're distributing electronic production equipment, so we've got quite a few brands that work in this area specifically. So for final assembly, for routing, for odd form placement, maybe it'd be robotic soldering or robotic dispensing. But the subject's so large, and it can be a small solution or a much larger one. But for the UK in current times, and well, to unpack the big question, I suppose, from the history, what we've got now in comparison to what we had before is the computing power to aggregate the data and the sensor points that robots require to do an accurate and repeatable job. Yeah. So for odd form, as an example, in times gone by, people thought they were very unreliable, there was an accuracy, maybe the computers couldn't keep up. But with the latest computer capabilities and software capabilities, now what you can find with a robot that's automatically placing through-hole components is that you can get a very repeatable process time and time again, but also a flexible robot that can understand live data points and change its programming based upon the sensory inputs that they have. But Stuart mentioned a good point about being scared about replacing human operators. And I think this is two-pronged. We've got this huge problem with Brexit at the moment. which some people are talking about. And then we've also got financial drivers from Eastern Europe, where the prices are lower to produce and mass produce electronics products. So what we found in UK, through UK distribution and in our accounts, a lot of our contract manufacturers, whether they're large, small, or OEMs, large or small, they're actually looking to automate back-end processes or automating processes where they can to reduce price points for the products that they have and automate the line further. But with Brexit, and you'll probably cover it in the talks later today, but there's also a marked decrease in the amount of engineering resource in the UK. You'd find it difficult to name a contract manufacturer in the south that isn't looking for a process engineer or someone that has IPC level soldering capabilities. Well, if you're really struggling to recruit staff, and we don't have the availability because some of our skilled Eastern European or European workers find it better to be back on the continent, then actually it kind of makes sense to invest in a process where you do get a repeatable output on a process that's mundane or can be repeated nice and easily, and give that company a chance to invest elsewhere or have talent for processes that need a human eye or a human mind. So it's a really big subject.
And it's something that is achievable now, isn't it? You know, you can invest. You don't have to invest tens of millions to do this sort of things, do you?
No.
It's within.
Definitely not. I mean, from our perspective, for a basic robotic soldering station, you'd be looking at somewhere around 25k euros for a system like that. And in comparison, for an operator cost that might be doing it for 8 hours a day for a year, you get a really quick ROI. And I mean, we've discussed some projects on this matter, but the same for odd form routing, etc. So I'd say highly affordable, at least with the 4-year projected return from the capital expenditure. It's well within that, I'd say.
And so what kind of line are you putting together then? And what aspects of it are you most interested in?
So if we talk a little bit about and again, Michael Ford mentioned that the CFX demonstration line will be in Productronica and then in Apex San Diego, and we're creating a permanent home, if you like, of CFX, and as much Hermes as we can do, which is the next protocols, if you like. And some of the equipment is bang up to date, and if we talk about the Co-Young SPI and AOI systems that Altus have provided, those machines are CFX compliant now. We have 11-year-old reflow ovens, and the challenge there is to create the connectivity that we need to make it a smart, traceable and closed loop and continuously improving and health monitoring line as we can. From a robot point of view, we've got Omron who are going to, and to some extent for us, it's the gap filling of material handling. So we're going to have some Omron transportation robots which will walk material around. So
they're really great, actually.
And a surface mount line, do you know what? You look at robots sometimes and they don't look fantastically fast, but you look at a modern, as well, even a 15-year-old surface mount line, and effectively they're Cartesian robots, and they're so evolved and so fast. So a surface mount line is already ultimate automation. Now we have some gaps then, don't we, which is getting the material onto the line, getting the material off the line, and maybe loading test systems that, and maybe again in the UK where only perhaps an automotive manufacturer can buy an entire line, and it's bang up to date, and it's as smart and as hands-free, lights out manufacturing. It's expensive and you have to buy, but most countries in the UK they're organically adding to their lines as they wear equipment out, as their needs change, and so probably to fill the gaps, that's where robots can be added in to fill those handling gaps between machines.
Yeah, and Stuart says an interesting point there around the data, closed loop, and also filling gaps. So Hermes, why it's so fantastic is because we're moving from a SMEMA standard where you're passing limited information to machines upstream or downstream or extended SMEMA for slightly further away, to an Ethernet connection that can transport data seamlessly throughout the whole line. So for automation and robotics, how about a cascading line that's communicating to each other, doing auto width adjustive handling and changing programs without an operator involved, or potentially with a feed forward and feedback. So I guess I know Co-Young, so I can speak about it, but with SPI these days and screen printing, one critical thing that you can do with an SPI, not just finding a no good print result, but you can aggregate data of boards that pass through that have been screen printed. And the Co-Young system will aggregate the data, work out what program changes might be beneficial, and then suggest program changes in real time to the printing function to improve the programs. And one of the latest things that Co-Young are doing regarding AOI, and we're desperately hoping that partners will come on board and share data, but the AOI can feed back based upon data aggregated and create changes to the pick and place function to improve the yields and outputs of the entire line. And this is where data and communication of the line and the ability to process it through maybe Michael's great tools of Aegis, let's say, or another ERP provider, it's allowing it not just to be a single production line, but more of a solution that's adaptable and using these changes. But I mean, I've seen the little Omron robots going around, and they're picking up empty magazine racks and taking off full ones. So we're getting quite close to a lights out factory of the future. I mean, I know that people have been saying it for years, and
well, it has. It's all, Michael actually touched on that in his keynote, isn't it? That Industry 4.0 has actually become a cliche, and some people say, "Can you stop talking about that because we're not there and we don't know we're going to get there?" But it's one of these things where it's not a blanket thing that's going to affect the whole industry, is it? Businesses, individual businesses will have small parts of them that become automated, that become robotized, that become completely, controlled by AI.
Yeah, and I think it will happen. I mean, SMT is as marvelous as it is, but it's getting to the limits of how much we could potentially do. I mean, there will be incremental changes, but it's more moving into software than hardware, from what I can see. If you look at back-end processes, this is like it's an area of production that has been so neglected, let's say, because people thought that through-hole components would disappear because everything would go down an SMT line, or they felt that maybe if they invested a lot in SMT, it would solve the problems of manual work. But if you think about every site in the UK, I mean, you'd struggle to go into a site that didn't have a manual soldering station, or someone using a nibbler or a manual router. And this is areas of production that companies can invest in robotic solutions and get a huge amount of increase or return on investment or profitability. Because if they're manually soldered THT parts, maybe they're more legacy, and they've had them for a longer time, and improving the output or production of those parts could really be beneficial for a company. But for sure, we've seen robotic soldering and anything around test beds, like Stuart mentioned. That's really an area to look at.
Do you think one of the opportunities and the barriers to all of this is what we just said, sharing? Because for robotics, machine learning, big data, AI, stack all of these up, it needs that big data. It needs sharing of information. Businesses haven't become successful traditionally by sharing a lot of information with their competitors. We were having a chat just beforehand where you had even one business where they had two separate plants that weren't quite even communicating with each other, or some where they do different aspects and both have issues with other parts of it, but they would, if they share their information, they'd complement each other and improve. Is that purely a cultural thing within businesses, do you think, or is there more evangelism of?
That's almost like I think in everything in business and in industry, that it's almost like it's evolutionary. There has to be competitiveness. If you don't have competitiveness, then people will become complacent. So actually, two sites, even with the same company, there will be people with different ideas, and I'm sure that the board of that company will quite like the competition where the best practice and maybe the key improvements will be discovered, and only by the difference in performance of the two plants do you really see what's adding value and really benefiting. You mentioned, the fact that Industry 4.0 perhaps isn't a happy place, as probably because we've expected too much too early, haven't we? The technology is coming of age now, and we're just not. The industry is not mature enough to use it. And I've had a conversation this morning saying that because the MTC is working at the smart factory project at the moment as the permanent demonstrator, we have a responsibility not to clutter and to simply collect data just because we can. I think we should all focus on usefulness and benefit, and almost park some of the stuff that we haven't found a use for it yet, and so that we can actually breathe life into Industry 4.0, and people can see the benefit more clearly, and then some of the more esoteric stuff, wait till we're ready to actually digest that.
And I think, to your point as well, there's kind of like a Darwinian principle of electronics manufacturing, where no one wants to give away their secrets, because if it gets rid of their edge, then someone else has got it. But we were discussing how amazing it would be if people were willing to share best practice to raise the entire standard of UK manufacturing as a whole, and look more globally to compete rather than within the UK. I mean, it's not going to be a reality, because maybe that's a bit utopian, but there is a sense of the Darwinian nature of it. But with in reference to robotics and automation, I mean, the work that you guys are doing with CFX, I mean, that is one bridge to communication. Okay, it's not company to company, but it's machine type to machine type. I mean, we've struggled no end to share data, but with platforms like CFX, which draw out information from the line, and allow data to be aggregated in some of these manufacturing tools, I mean, that is a step forward. But hopefully we can see, hopefully companies will work out that there is benefit to collaborating, that if customers want an entire solution, it might not necessarily be an entire line from one distributor or manufacturer. It could be that people value a process of a specific manufacturing type, and the use of CFX like you guys are doing with your line, I think that's going to be the next step really in communication.
I mean, that is it, isn't it? Communication. CFX is something that gives it's non, it's totally agnostic, so it can take in everything, and you can attach even a Raspberry Pi little board to old, like you said, you've got ovens that have been using for a long time. You can connect them to it, so it's not. Once people see that there is a tangible benefit and it's not a massive investment, it's going to start to get some momentum, isn't it?
And I think that's probably one of the most important things for the MTC is we are a sandpit, and if you've got a factory that's busy trying to meet, I can't imagine there's many factories where people are having an easy ride and they're delivering everything, because obviously we try and do everything at the lowest cost, so people are always in demand to deliver. Now, if you're a works manager, would you want to experiment too much and actually risk damaging your output and your process? So the MTC is that sandpit, and we'd like to offer to de-risk. People can see things done and come and have a play. And I think when we talk about sharing, I think the elephant in the room is security as well, isn't it?
Which we haven't even mentioned. Yes.
And I think that is a common problem for everybody, and the UK is definitely the home of high value manufacturing. So we're not making car alarms and things like that. We're making defence products, security products, usually high value things where there is a need for high levels of security, and the companies that are making these things if you have a piece of equipment that becomes connected to the web, that piece of equipment becomes could become the weak link to the intranet for that company. So I think the very common goal for all the companies, we're all in the same boat. We do need to work together on the security solutions. I think CFX is based on a financial security standard, but the partners, if you like, of the MTC project are even saying that they don't feel that's good enough.
Really?
So we have this elephant in the room, the security, and we all need to work together on that. And then the sharing and differentiating where people can take things further. I think our goal is to make sure that nobody falls by the wayside and kind of, if you like, everybody gets, we help people have an even basic assistance and a technology level, and then some companies have the means to take it to a whole new level, and once they've done that, they will not talk to the MTC about it because they've differentiated themselves. We might have helped them get on to step one, but once they've got, once they've lit the touch paper and they've gone and they've evolved it to a really differential level, and again, that is without competitiveness, you don't have a capitalist.
No,
and
society.
To that point as well, with the high value, the quality of electronics that we manufacture in the UK, I think it makes it even more important that we push the boundaries consistently. Because I feel like as a nation with very high engineering talent and resource, let's say, at the top end and high value products, I think that companies need to continually look for ideas, if they're not off-the-shelf solution, on how to make these things happen, because that's the only way that we maintain to be the capabilities that we have in the UK and continue to push forward. So I guess what I would be, my request to UK Electronics would to think outside of the box for solutions, try and understand new processes, impacts, work with your partners, work with the MTC, work with distributors, even if they're not Altus, on saying, this is the idea I have. I feel like there's a product in here, and it wouldn't just solve my problems, but it could be an industry product, so that we can continue to develop systems and ways to support in new innovative methods.
And it strikes me that the overarching message here, that it's an opportunity. It takes a little bit of foresight, a bit of bravery to take that leap. But we're in a position now with Brexit that things are going to, well, not even just Brexit, the globals, US, potential trade war with China. Everything is changing. The one thing we can be sure of is that things are going to change. So we're going
to need to be more self-sufficient, and instead of just looking at a catalogue of products which are imported, the encouraging thing is we're going to, if there's an opportunity to satisfy within the UK a supply chain of technology.
Isn't it? Yeah.
And those that lift their head above the parapet and don't do the standard things might see a huge benefit in comparison to those that don't. I think the opportunity is the key thing with robotics. You can't be scared to be the first, because if you are the first, you might steal a march on the rest of the market to follow.
I'd like to probably take an opportunity to talk about a couple of little... So, of course, we talked about these super machines. So maybe pure automation, an automation system and robots, kind of, where something is got a very dedicated purpose. And this goes back to something Joe mentioned earlier. If something has a very dedicated purpose and it will always do that purpose, that's an automation system or machine. Then we talked about flexibility. The thing about a robot as opposed to an automation system is it is ultimately repurposable, isn't it? So you can program it with different end effectors and movement systems. A robot can potentially do anything that its limbs will allow it to do. So it's that ultimate flexibility in conjunction and as well as pure automation systems. Probably another quick discussion. robots and collaborative robots. I don't know if there's been much discussion about that, but if you think of a robot that has no self-awareness, and if you got in the way, it would break your ribs, that was a straightforward robot, and you would put that in a cage or a perspex environment, and you would keep away from it. That will always be the cheapest robot to do a purpose. Now collaborative robots, these are the ones that have perhaps a slightly limited, they're a more limited strength and payload, because they have to be aware that when they've touched a human being, that they stop.
Yeah.
Now that one is a more expensive robot, but in the kind of evolution of people and learning to live with, and we talked about repetitiveness and maybe a little Omron robot bringing you your next batch of material to be produced. Maybe as we evolve, the collaborative robot will work with us, and the robot will hand us things, we will hand things to the robot, and they will do their repetitive or more difficult things where you want to remove variability. Humans are great flexible, but we vary. Robot and automation won't. So maybe people will start to see collaborative robots initially as a friend and a helper.
Yes.
And maybe that's how we will move into the next
stage of that.
evolution.
And it ties into how we process data. Because I think traditionally, and to the point I made earlier, traditionally we didn't have enough computing power, not enough sensors, not enough ability to process. But now with CUDA cards, all the computing power that we have, you could take a collaborative robot that has all these sensory inputs, and with a very flexible programming platform, and you can re-establish it for a new role.
Yeah.
And that's where an investment has future-proofing, flexibility and future-proofing, and it's like a perfect fulcrum point of computing power, machine flexibility, sensors, software, and they all tie in to get us to this cusp where in the next, I'd imagine in the next few years, and I mean we're always looking out for platforms that are on the cusp or moving forward, but in the next few years I'm sure there'll be more innovative collaborative robots, which were kind of coming in, right, and are going to be pushing even further to come forward, I'd imagine.
Yep.
It's going to be interesting. Even in a year's time, I think we'll see some big differences and changes.
I'm thinking Productronica, maybe.
Exactly. Yes,
there'll be some new releases or something.
There's a lot of whispers about
Productronica.
Actually, what we might see there. So that'll be interesting. Well, thank you for your time. It's fascinating to have an insight into actually the cutting edge as well, because like you say, the sandbox is the ideal way of proving this kind of technology and development. So it's fascinating. Thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Joe.